Mary, good to see you.
Hi,
How are
friend.
you?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited to dive into what we're going to talk about. We have a lot of folks who follow our work. They're in Fully Funded Academy with us. They attend some of our trainings. We hear from them, email, social, here on YouTube now. And what I often hear from people is, hey, we are trained with this larger organization. We love them. We appreciate them. We honor them. And there's some things that we're not learning how to do, and that's why they come to us. So I want to have a conversation around some of this kind of stuff and fill in the gaps, if you will. What are some of the traditional fundraising methods that people have been taught over the last 10, 20 years?
Yeah, so some of the traditional ways that sending organizations train people are to basically send them out on their own. And I think that that's something that so many people don't realize that it's a lonely journey to go on this adventure. I'll say that this challenge of getting fully funded and raising your own support by yourself. And so many of our students tell us that they feel like they're alone, that they don't have the support system to back them. And then when they do have the support system, they often don't have somebody who's actually fully funded training them.
Well,
I don't think that people realize that that's such a bad thing. Like, why would you go learn how to run a marathon with somebody who's never run a marathon before? It's the same kind of story. Our students are not going to get fully funded without having a true guide that's gotten there themselves. The downside to some of the methods that some of these sending organizations are training on is that they're missing out on the opportunity of inviting people into their ministry. They're not able to actually befriend people because they're always on a mission to try and sell their organization, try and sell their ministry. And as you and I know, selling is not the way to go. Serving is the way to go. You want to serve, not sell your people. So by giving them just this little inkling of information about like, hey, just go talk to people that you know in your church. Go talk to people who you've known over the years. That just doesn't serve our people very well. And it just feels very inauthentic. And I think in the end, feel very abandoned. And that's really unfortunate for so many people to feel like they're in that boat.
yeah, it's like it happens on both sides, right? Because you're being sent out, you're being told that the best way to raise money is just go shake the trees, just pound the pavement, really, really just try to like make contact with people. We share several examples of that in our book where you've had people reach out, and it sort of neglects that cultivation of deeper, more meaningful, connected relationships. Um, and I think that's something that does go overlooked when you look at the folks that we've worked with, my own personal friends, even the work that I'm now doing with Ugandan Water Project. We've talked about that the last couple of episodes. And I'm like, not only do we need to get bigger, but we need to get bigger by getting smaller. Like, how do we bring them into more of a personal connection? Can you share a little bit about how you teach people to cultivate those more meaningful relationships?
The way that I teach people to cultivate more meaningful relationships is to put themselves in their donor's shoes. Stop for one moment and realize they are busy, busy people. They have jobs, they have families, they have lives. And they don't sit around thinking about, gosh, I wonder what, John is doing in Uganda today. That is not on the top of their mind. And so by really putting yourself in those shoes and realizing that they do care about you, it's not that they don't care. It's just that life is so busy and they got all these other things going on. How can I be a part of their life? How can they be a part of ours without us interrupting their life? And so that's where I just feel like the relationships of just do life together. I will say I've worked in the secular, I'll use the term secular environment for well over a decade. And I've worked in the Christian, this space with ministries and missionaries for over a decade now as well. And I will say that on the side of working with those secular organizations is that they're very strategic. They I know I had data. I had a lot of information. I knew where people lived. I knew how much money they made. Like I knew way too much information about people. On the other side, on the ministry side, you guys know everything about them from a deeper, more rooted, like you know how to pray for them. You know how to minister to them. You know how to love them. And so you have the greatest advantage over every other nonprofit organization asking for money. So I often just be like, just go do what you do. Love people, pray for them, do life with them. And then ultimately what happens is people can't help but want to be a part of what you're doing. And they lean in and they ultimately do give to your ministry then.
It's funny you mentioned about how like they have busy lives. And that's one of the things that we teach in the academy. It's like, how do we come alongside what's already happening in their lives? Right? Like a very simple thing is just to follow what's going on the calendar. If it's Easter, they're probably thinking about Easter. If it's Mother's Day, they're probably thinking about Mother's Day, Father's Day. So there are all these mile markers in the calendar. In the marketing world, we just refer to that as calendar marketing. It's not complex. It's just like, let's base things off. We know February, Valentine's Day. We know March, St. Patty's Day or spring. And just talk about those things in your correspondence, in your emails. One of the things, just kind of as a follow-up to some of our previous conversations about like you got a water project, it's like, I'm looking at their overall calendar, Mare, and I'm like, okay, what are the big pushes that you guys have during the year? It is not very different than the married missionary couple we've worked with in our calls. It's not that different. It's sort of like, okay, well, we have a big fundraising drive in the first part of the year because we have a 5K, like a race. And then we have summer matching campaigns. And then they have World Water Day, which in our world is probably like Mission Sunday, right? Or Giving Tuesday, right? And then it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do in the summer? Oh, we have a golf tournament. That's kind of a live event that you always talk about, right? Fundraising events. And then what happens at the end of the year? I mean, very obvious. We have our year-end giving campaign.
Yep.
It's like super similar. Like there's not really a lot of variance. But when I'm planning out, hey, what should you be writing in your emails? I'm like, well, they should all point to these big initiatives. But in those individual emails, we want to come alongside of what's already happening in the calendar. So yeah, it's like, it's funny because it's like everyone's different, but the principles are largely the same. Have you noticed that?
Absolutely. Well, and I work with really large scale organizations, the middle size organizations, and then you've got small organizations, and then you got missionaries, right? So it's like everybody's got a different size budget. But in the end, we all have the same 12 months in the year. We still only have 24 hours in the day. And so when you're mapping out, for me, whenever I map out a fundraising calendar, I'm always doing exactly what you just said. I'm looking at where are all the peak seasons, and so for many on the mission side or on the ministry side, there's high mission seasons. It's like we are traveling heavily during these seasons. So therefore, we're not running big fundraising campaigns during that same time. And same thing for ministries, missionaries. You guys have heavy travel seasons. Sometimes you're coming back to the States or going to a different international location. We're not going to run heavy fundraising stuff during that time. So yeah, absolutely. It's all the same. It's all the same.
It really is.
A lot of similarities.
It's so similar, and we overthink it. And I think one of the advantages that we sometimes forget that we have is that we are more personal. So just double down on that. Write more personal emails, write more personal updates. Have you ever seen an organization, a larger organization, downsize or shift their approach to fundraising to a more personal approach? Have you ever seen anything like that?
I have seen organizations absolutely downsize from the larger scale down to a smaller, more personal level because it got away from them. A lot of times it's like we grew too fast. We boots on the ground and we just started going and running. And so then we were trying to play catch up to the organization. And then they've got to come back around and be like, oh, shoot, now we got to start filling in the gaps. And I find that that's where people find us, is that I don't think very many people find us and they're like, I've never asked for money before. Of course you've asked for money before. You just probably didn't do it very well. And now you're like, shoot, maybe I should go find somebody who's done this before who can teach me. So it's like rebuilding the foundation and then building it back up again. So I'm not saying like they shut it all down or close down all their programs or everything, but they stop focusing on expanding their programs and they start looking at how do we build a stronger foundation on this thing. It's like building a house, right? Like if you build a small house and now all of a sudden you're like, shoot, there's a lot of people in this house. Like I got extra kids, and you start like sometimes you just add more rooms. Like you put up more walls, you start, you renovate and you just try and make more space with what you got. Sometimes organizations do that. And then sometimes they're like, this house is too small. We have to find something new. Like we have to either tear this thing completely down and rebuild it bigger. Because if you were to plop a huge house on a tiny foundation, the thing is going to fall apart. Okay. Like it just is natural. Like it cannot hold it. So that's where, people have to have those moments where you're like, do we have to just tear this whole thing down and rebuild it again? Or, what does this have to look like? And Mike, you and I have a checklist that we use for our program, and it allows people to rebuild the foundation without tearing it all down. So it's like, just go to step one and start saying, what is our vision for this thing? And you just start working through the process. And eventually you're like, okay, like we can actually build this on the foundation we created, or we got to tear it down.
I want to share, I'm going to share my screen here and show you the subject lines that I've written for Uganda Water Project here in the next couple of weeks. Right. And if you're watching here on YouTube, you should be able to see this. And my kind of test, Mare, is that when I look at the subject lines as is without any context, are they interesting? Are they going to grab a little bit of attention? Are they aligned with the personality of the ministry or the organization or the people they're in? Like this organization, they work really hard. They do really incredible work, like everyone else who we know,
Right.
right? But there's a quirky side to them. They're fun. They're very eccentric, right? So, I mean, if I got an email from them and it just said fun, period, I'd probably open it. I'm like, what is that about? There's a tinge of mystery, right? And I can't get any water. Just putting that in quotes makes it sound urgent. It makes it sound unique. Now here you can say, take me running with you, said this thingamajig, right? And we're going to talk about the 5K, their race. And you can see here, though, at the fourth email, a letter from a donor I'd like you to see. That sounds a little bit more serious. So just reading these subject lines gives you a sense of where is this all sort of going. Here, a stronger call to action as we go closer to the 5K date. Join, and I'm going to update this subject line depending on how many people join the race. Join 100 of your peers that joined our 5K. You can do it virtually. And then please open me. Our 5K is this Saturday. Now, after that, what happens, we've got to promote the golf tournament, but it's a long ways away because the golf tournament's in July. So I'm like, all right, next email.
That one's my favorite by far.
Cancel any time without pretending you moved. And I'm going to talk about their monthly giving tier. They call it the river.
Yeah.
Right. And this is really integral to what they do because as all of us know, cash flow is king. You need to have cash flow. It's the lifeblood of your ministry and organization. So I want to talk about that monthly subscription and probably feature somebody who is a monthly donor. So you guys can see, like, none of these look like, hey, give me money. None of these are like crying, give me money. You can, like, if you need to do that, you can, but they're different. They're unique. You guys can just lift these and like now you can see here, I am starting to talk about the golf tournament 2 months ahead of time. Golfer in the family, we've got something special for you. Here's Mother's Day. I don't know if I'm going to keep that subject line, but I just know on May 6th, the email needs to be about Mother's Day. So I'm filling these things in. How to build a legacy you can be proud of. I mean, that's a direct connection to Mother's Day. Like legacy.
Yeah.
Here's how you can build a legacy you can be proud of. Support this organization. Get your kids involved. Like I noticed that when I went to Uganda, kids were writing notes included with the water filters. So this is a cool way. Like imagine you and Maya sitting down and doing that, right? At last, the secret of greater fulfillment revealed. Like, what is it? Legacy, like doing something fulfilling, right? And then we get quirky again. Summer vacation plans enclosed. Join our golf tournament. And then we have Father's Day. And so, like, what I would say here is that if you are struggling with content, writing emails, what you want to say, just take a 30,000-foot view at this, pull back a little bit, think about the bigger things that are on your calendar and then how you break them down. So again, I'm going to turn off the screen share here. Feel free to lift this, use it as inspiration for your own stuff. Mary, I'm sure that in these larger organizations you worked with, they had plans like this.
Yeah. And the thing that I love about what you teach and what you tell people about is just making it personal. So those emails are also not coming from a stranger. It's somebody that they wanted to get information from. But I have hands down, I think that this is one of the best things that Mike, you have offered to our students is giving them. You wrote them literally one email every single month to send to their donors just on the calendar that you just mentioned. So I'm like, it's really not rocket science here, like to just take what's going on in the calendar, your anniversary, the end of the year, Christmas, like you got all sorts of things that you can pull from. But it makes it, like you said, you're not trying to sell them, you're not trying to scam them into doing something that they don't want to do. So I think it's brilliant.
What are some things that break your heart about how missionaries and ministry leaders are taught to raise support? And some of the things you just say, oh, please don't do that. Please don't ever do this. What are like the absolute Mary's list of no-nos?
If I were to give you Mary's list of no-nos, at the top of my list is sending a bulk mass email and like mass message on Facebook, mass letter to a bunch of strangers. Like when I say strangers, I mean, you haven't talked to them in over 10 years. This is like my number one no-no. If I had to tell you how many times I've gotten messages from people I went to high school with, okay, I'm 44 years old, okay? Like I haven't been in high school since I was 17, all right? So these relationships, I don't know, did you get married? Do you have kids? Did you go to college? What was your degree? Like I know nothing about your life. And then sending me a message saying, hey, I've gone into ministry work and I'm going to be helping refugees in third world, from third world countries, and I really don't mean to be disrespectful. Like I really don't mean to be that way, but it's just so hard being on the recipient side of that. When I receive them, it gives me this like really like not good feeling in the pit of my stomach. So I can only imagine you on the other side sending those out because maybe a sending organization encouraged you to do it because they said, hey, go from your A list to your B list to your C. And now I am on your D and your F list. And I don't want to be on anybody's D and F list. Okay. So I just know that you've gone through all of your good contacts and now you've come down to the bottom of the barrel, which is where I'm sitting. And that's just not a good place to be in. So that is absolutely on my no-no list is that I'm like, what I would say to opposite, to combat that is that I want you to find somebody like, let's just use Mike as an example. Mike is an A donor to your ministry. He prays, he attends, he's giving, and is just a really strong advocate for your organization. I would much rather you spend your time and your energy connecting with Mike to say, hey, Mike, how can we tell more people about the work that we're doing? Do you have any advice on how we could get into your church, your home church, maybe into your small group, maybe into, do you have people in your inner circle that would be interested in the work that we're doing? That is a better use of your time than to send cold messages out to the interwebs. Like, just into it's just going to die on the vine and you're going to lose relationships. But here's the thing. If you have done it, which many people have done it, give yourself a little bit of forgiveness because I know immediately people go, oh my gosh, I did that. And you feel really bad. And I just know Mike and I never, our intention is not to make you feel bad. Our intention is just that you would realize it. And there's always ways to repair those relationships if you have done it.
So while you were sharing here, I looked up this person, and I'm gonna
Oh, no.
show you guys the screen. I'm gonna block out the names, right? But this is really interesting because I've used this as an example in some of our fully funded classes. This is somebody who's all of a sudden is back in my inbox. I don't know, haven't talked to in years, right? So check this out. I want you to look at the dates on the right side. Like 2006, you see that? 2007,
Yep.
2007, 2007. And there's just like 2008. And there's like a 15-year gap, 2009 to 2023. Like what?
What in the world?
What in the world? And then it's
Um,
just like, look at this. I'm just getting pounded. 2024. Look at all these emails I got last year. Just
Yeah.
pounded, pounded, pounded. Sometimes the same day, multiple emails, right? Just pounded. And I'm like, man, this is exactly what we're talking about. Like, this is not how, like, I probably just haven't unsubscribed so that I could use it as examples in my,
You
in our,
have.
in our class.
Well, and I do the same thing. I have samples that I share with our students. And the whole point of it is not to, make anybody feel bad. The thing is that if you can see what others are doing, that is, from our perspective as donors to ministries. P.S. Mike and I both love ministries. We want to give. We're not saying that the people on the receiving end don't want to give. They just don't want to get communication like this. Do you even know this person at all? Like, do you remember how you got connected with them in the first place back in '07?
I think I led worship at a conference that he was speaking at, and had gone to their church a few times, like as a guest. And then it would just, obviously, like, we didn't stay in touch, and
But
a
you
lot can happen in
somehow,
15 years. Like, it would
yeah,
have
but
been
you,
nice to just get an email and be like, "Hey, Mike, thinking about you. How you doing?" And just leave it at that. Not even like, "Hey, can you catch up? You want to talk?" Like then I probably know something's coming. But it's just like, "Hey, just thinking about it." You can write back and let that connection sort of rekindle. If we haven't had a connection for a while, and then it's like, boom, here's all this stuff, it's like, it makes me withdraw. I just want to, whoa, this is way too much, too fast, too soon. Like, let's see where we are in life. Like you mentioned, like, are we aligned still? What have you been up to? Like, there's so many things that this person doesn't know about me. And conversely, I don't know about them,
sure.
except now he's just telling me, and it's like a one-way communication. So yeah, like that. I think that's one thing. That's a big thing that we've seen many of our students and members struggle with when they first work with us. We're like, you don't have to communicate in a way that's not aligned with like how you actually communicate with people in real life. And if you do think that this is the only way, good luck. But we're going to honestly tell you what's going on in the world right now. People don't really like this kind of communication where they're just blasted on everything. So, um, it is kind of a shift that we've got to make. And those are some of the habits that we feel some of our members need to unlearn. If you're adding value and sharing some helpful things every email in some way, shape, or form, it doesn't mean that you have to teach or preach. It just means that you need to evoke some sort of an emotion. Is it like I was working on some of these emails for the 5K, and I looked up, like, what's a story I could wrap into this email that can add value to any reader, whether they support the organization or not, whether they enjoy running or not. And I found this story, Mary, of this lady. She had written a book many years ago called Lessons from Last Place. And she had run the New York Marathon something like 27 years in a row and came in last place every single year, but she kept just showing up. Now she's in her 70s, and she wrote this book a number of years ago. And I'm like, this is a story of resilience. Like, this can be helpful to their readers, their donors. It's helpful to anybody. And then I can kind of talk about the 5K or getting involved. And it's
Yeah.
just a softer way. Like, if you have something good to share, you typically will have no problem sharing it. You and I send each other memes all the time.
Yeah. Well,
Like, this is
and
helpful. It'll make him laugh.
that's
You
right.
send me stuff. Yeah.
But that's what relationships are about. Like, that's just a reminder that it's a mutual win-win on both sides. So when somebody feels like it's just a one-sided conversation all the time, I'm not gaining any insights or any growth or anything from it. They're going to unsubscribe. They're going to stop following, and I just find that I know that back again that this is how your brain functions. Like, you have the ability to really kind of see a story and how, like, oh, I could take that and that would, I could really serve somebody in that. And for myself, and maybe many of the people who are watching or listening are thinking, that's just not natural for me. And that's okay. You just have to allot more time to start to build that muscle. Mike has built the muscle over years and years and decades of storytelling. And you just got to start working on it. Mike and I, we always say fundraising, storytelling, it's a muscle. If you haven't used it, it's going to take you a little while at first. But once you start to, okay, this is a habit. We send out emails, twice a month instead of newsletters twice a year. It's a different kind of, calendar. It's a different kind of, rhythm. So I just hope you can take some advice and also just, think through maybe communicating more often, and a more, win-win situation is going to be beneficial in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, one more thing before you take off. If you have not checked out our book yet, just go on Amazon, grab it. And we're just excited to be here with you and share some of these insights. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you and what other topics we can cover in future episodes. So take care.
Yeah. See you guys soon.
God bless.